Welcome to the Explainer. I am so glad you're here because today we're unpacking one of the most elegant, literally the most visually satisfying concepts in all of biology. We're diving into the mechanics of genetic prediction using what I like to call the game board approach. Now, if you've ever wondered exactly how traits are passed down from one generation to the next, whether we're talking about human eye color or the height of a plant in your garden, well, there's a hidden mathematical code at work. And today, we're going to learn how to read that code, predict the outcomes of genetic combinations, and really model these traits step by step. Get ready because genetics is about to become incredibly clear. To kick things off, let's consider a real-world genetic mystery. Say two perfectly tall plants reproduce. Is it mathematically possible for them to have a short offspring? I mean, your instincts probably scream, no way, tall plus tall equals tall, right? It just seems like common sense. But as we know, genetics is rarely just about what we can see right there on the surface. There's a whole world of invisible information carried inside parental gametes. By the end of this explainer, we're going to use core Mendelian principles to completely solve this puzzle. We'll prove not just if it's possible, but exactly how probable it actually is. All right, before we play the game, we gotta meet our players. Traits are determined by pairs of variations called alleles. First up, we have our dominant alleles, represented by a loud, proud capital T for tall. Dominant alleles are kind of the extroverts of genetics. Whenever they're around, they express themselves fully in the physical appearance, completely masking any matching recessive variants. On the flip side, we have our recessive alleles, represented by a quiet, lowercase t for short. These are the introverts. They stay physically hidden in the background as long as a dominant allele is hanging around. The only time a recessive allele gets to show off its physical trait is if the organism inherits two of them, a pairing we call homozygous recessive or simply little t, little t. Okay, let's dive right into our game board, the classic 2x2 Punnett square. This is basically the ultimate tool for forecasting the probability of offspring traits. For our little plant mystery, we're setting up a standard monohybrid heterozygous cross. So what does that actually mean? It means both of our parent plants are tall, but, and here's the kicker, they both carry that hidden short gene. We place the first parent's alleles, capital T and lowercase t, across the top. The second parent's alleles, capital T and lowercase t, run down the side. The four blank spaces in the middle, those represent the exact probability of all possible genetic combinations for their offspring. So let's start mapping them out. Think of this as a quick whiteboard walkthrough. We bring the dominant allele from the top down and the dominant allele from the side across, and boom, our first square is filled with two capital T's. This pairing is what we call homozygous dominant. Homo meaning same. Since both alleles are the dominant tall gene, this offspring is mathematically guaranteed to be a tall plant. There is absolutely no hidden recessive trait here. It's tall genes all the way down. Now try to predict the next move before we walk through it. We pull the lowercase t from the top and the capital T across. Usually we write the capital letter first, giving us a capital T and a lowercase t. This pairing is known as heterozygous. Hetero meaning different. Now remember our players from a minute ago? Even though this plant carries the genetic code for shortness, that loud dominant capital T completely masks the recessive lowercase t. So physically, what's this plant going to look like? It's going to look exactly like its parent, a perfectly tall plant. All right, moving on down to the next possibility. We bring the dominant capital T down and pull the recessive lowercase t across. Once again, we've got a heterozygous pairing. Capital T, lowercase t. Just like the last one, this combination contains the genetic instructions for both tall and short. But because the dominant trait always wins out when they're paired together, this offspring is also going to grow up to be a completely tall plant. So we've mapped out 3 out of our 4 possibilities, and so far every single combination gives us a tall plant. And this brilliantly illustrates the solution to our mystery. Check out that final possibility. We pull the lowercase t down and the lowercase t across, leaving us with 2 recessive alleles, little t, little t. This is our homozygous recessive pairing, and since there's no dominant capital T around to mask it, the short trait finally gets to express itself. We've just proved mathematically that yes, 2 tall parents carrying hidden recessive genes absolutely can produce a short offspring. The game board doesn't lie, those hidden traits simply found each other. Now that the mystery is solved, we need to clearly distinguish between the invisible code and the visible result.
let's formalize the math we just modeled. The first concept you really need to grasp is the genotypic distribution ratio. Genotype simply refers to the genes, the actual letters we just mapped out. So the genotypic distribution is the underlying mathematical output of that genetic makeup. It's the precise ratio of the different letter combinations produced by our cross. Understanding this ratio is absolutely crucial. It's the foundation for making any accurate scientific prediction.
What's really fascinating here is how our 4 outcomes perfectly translate into exact mathematical percentages. Look at the genotypic distribution for our heterozygous cross. It creates a strict 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. 1 out of the 4 possibilities, or 25%, is homozygous dominant, TT. 2 out of the 4, meaning exactly 50% of our outcomes, are heterozygous, TT. And finally, 1 out of 4, the remaining 25%, is homozygous recessive, TT. 1 to 2 to 1. This represents the invisible genetic truth of our offspring population.
Okay, let's shift from genotype to phenotype and see how this builds into what we actually experience in the real world. The phenotypic expression ratio refers to the visible physical traits that result from those genetic combinations. It is literally what the organism looks like. If the genotype is the blueprint, well, the phenotype is the completed building. It's the height of the plant, or whether a human child has brown eyes or blue eyes. Phenotype is simply the physical expression of the winning genes.
And here is where the math beautifully translates into reality. Because of the masking power of dominant alleles, our 1 to 2 to 1 genetic split perfectly creates a 3 to 1 physical split. The 25% that were capital T, plus the 50% that were capital T lowercase t, well, they merge together. Why? Because they all physically look exactly the same. They make up a massive 75% slice of offspring expressing the dominant physical form, tall. That leaves only our little t pairing to make up the final 25% displaying the recessive format, short. So, for every seed these specific parents produce, there is exactly a 25% chance it'll grow into a short plant.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to think about the incredible implications of that 50% heterozygous slice we saw earlier. Half of the offspring in our model look perfectly tall, yet they are silently carrying the instructions for shortness, just waiting to be passed on. It shows us that recessive genetics are enduring, they're patient, and they are hidden in plain sight. It leaves us with a pretty fascinating thought to ponder. If a trait is hidden today, whose generation will it shape tomorrow? Keep looking past the surface, you guys, because the math of life is always calculating its next move. Thanks so much for learning with me today.